The Committee to Protect Journalists has included Azerbaijan on its list of the 10 most censored countries in the world. Azerbaijan is the only country on the list which is the member of the Council of Europe and is getting ready for the first European Olympics. How did things get to this point?
The record of Azerbaijan when it comes to press freedom has been notoriously abysmal. However, in the past couple of years, the crackdown on the media, on the independent critics of Azerbaijani government, on opposition activists, on civil activists and human rights defenders has indeed reached an unprecedented level. The main source of information in Azerbaijan, the broadcasting media, were especially the international media who were available, were banned from broadcasting. And so even alternative sources of information are very scarce. When we assess our candidates for the most censored list, we always look at several criteria. The ability of independent media to function relatively freely in the country, the number of journalists who are in prison for their work, the number of journalists who have had to flee the country because of different kinds of pressure on them in retaliation for their professional activities. We look at ability to access the internet and alternative sources of information, and so on and so forth. And in Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan really marked all of these criteria, and in the worst possible way. Azerbaijan is the leading jailer of journalists in the Europe and Central Asia region, with now at least 8 journalists directly jailed for their work. In a low light for Azerbaijan is a leading media rights defender, Emin Huseynov, who had to flee and hide into the Swiss embassy because his own country has been persecuting him on politically motivated charges and was ready to incarcerate him. So the conditions are really dismal. We didn't think twice but to include Azerbaijan in this list.
What are the areas of the greatest concern?
Well, I mean, aren't these areas enough? Journalists behind bars, dozens of journalists having to flee the country because they can't report freely in their own. Media, independent media, shuttered by authorities on a various number of politically motivated charges, and their families harassed. In many cases that we have documented, debilitating prosecutions, paralyzing of activities of non-governmental NGOs. I mean, the list goes on. We can talk about this for a long time, and I can still go on with that list.
Nina Ognianova, a group of international organizations that include CPJ, issued a letter to the European Court of Human Rights calling on the court to prioritize the review of 9 journalist cases from Azerbaijan. Could you please elaborate on that?
Well, in the run-up to the European Games, which we all know are going to be hosted by Baku this year, a number of international organizations decided to form the Sport for Rights Coalition around the idea that the European Games indeed should be a force for good, as the Olympic Charter states. And so the EOC and other international leaders have to press Azerbaijan to adhere to its voluntarily assumed international commitments on human rights and to fulfill its obligations on press freedom and human dignity. Now, in this run-up, we have seen not a relenting of pressure on the media, but rather an increased harassment and censorship. This prompted our coalition to write to the European Court of Human Rights, where there are a number of Azerbaijani press cases pending, and some of them have been pending for months and years without a response by the European Court, and to ask the European Court to expedite the review and to prioritize the review of these cases, because they're emblematic for the dire conditions in which human rights and civil society is in this host country.
What should be done to ensure release of all human rights activists, bloggers and journalists ahead of the European Games, which Baku will host in an effort to promote its image?
And Azerbaijan has to respond to both domestic and international concerns on human rights and press freedom, and the international community has to constructively pressure Azerbaijan to release its political prisoners before the games start. This could be done in many ways, in bilateral and multilateral talks with Azerbaijan, by international leaders who have actual pressure points to bring about with Azerbaijan. It has to be a condition, indeed, for starting the European Games. The release of political prisoners has to be a condition.
Nina Ognianova, thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.